Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was adopted by son of best jeanist. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The sound of a sewing machine was the heartbeat of the Midoriya household. It was a rhythmic, comforting thrum that vibrated through the floorboards and into the soles of Izuku's feet. For as long as he could remember, his mother, Inko, had been surrounded by spools of thread, mountains of fabric, and the gentle scent of steam and starch. 7-year-old Izuku sat cross-legged on the floor, his eyes glued to the television screen where All Might was laughing in the face of danger, but his hands were busy mimicking his mother. He held a scrap of coarse denim and a blunt plastic needle, trying to weave a piece of red yarn through the weave. "Izuku, honey, watch your tension," Inko said softly, not looking up from her work. The machine slowed as she navigated a particularly tricky curve on a sleeve. If you pull too tight, the fabric puckers. If you leave it too loose, the structure fails. It has to be just right. Like a smash? Izuku asked, looking up with wide, emerald eyes. Inko smiled, a sad, sweet expression that crinkled the corners of her eyes. Yes. Like a smash. But quieter. She lifted the garment she was working on. It wasn't a normal shirt. It was made of a heavy, reinforced denim weave, stitched with high-tensile carbon thread. It was a repair job for a hero agency, freelance work that Inko took on to make ends meet. She was a master seamstress, capable of repairing the specialized fiber-based costumes that big support companies often overcharged for. "Is that for him?" Izuku whispered, awestruck. Inko nodded, smoothing the high collar of the jacket. "The fiber hero, best jeanist. His agency sent over a batch of backup suits for repair. He fights with threads, Izuku. He understands that the strongest things aren't always the hardest. Sometimes they're the ones that can bend without breaking." Izuku touched the fabric. It was stiff, almost like armor. "He's cool. But not as cool as All Might." "No one is, sweetie," she laughed, standing up and stretching her back. "Come on. I need to drop this off at the courier station, and then we need groceries. Maybe we can get katsudon for dinner?" Izuku cheered, dropping his plastic needle. He didn't know it then, as he scrambled to put on his bright yellow sneakers, that this would be the last conversation about fabric he would ever have with her. He didn't know that the thread of their lives was about to be cut, violently and without remorse. The Musutafu's shopping district was bustling. It was a Saturday, and the sun was high, casting long shadows beneath the awnings of the shops. Izuku held Inko's hand tightly. The crowds always made him a little nervous. He was small for his age, and ever since the doctor had told him he was quirkless 3 years ago, he felt even smaller. "Mom? Can we look at the hero figures?" "After the errands, Izuku," Inko promised, shifting the heavy garment bag on her shoulder. "We just need to." The explosion didn't sound like a sound. It felt like a physical blow, a sudden pressure wave that knocked the air out of the street. Glass shattered. Not just a window, but all the windows. The ground shook as a villain erupted from the bank across the street. He was a hulking mass of jagged crystal and rock, a mutant-type quirk that turned his skin into shrapnel. He roared, swiping a massive arm through a lamppost, sending it crashing into a parked car. "Stay back. I'll level the whole block." The villain screamed, his voice grinding like stones. Panic ensued. The crowd surged backward, a tidal wave of terrified civilians. Inko gasped, her grip on Izuku's hand tightening to the point of pain. "Izuku, move!" she cried, pulling him toward an alleyway. But the crowd was too dense. Someone shoved Inko, spinning her around. The garment bag slipped from her shoulder. "Mom!" Izuku shrieked. "Don't worry about the bag. Run!" They were almost to the alley when the villain turned his attention to the fleeing crowd. "Stop running, you insects!" he bellowed. He slammed his fists together, and a shockwave of crystal shards sprayed outward like a shotgun blast. Pro-heroes were on the scene, but they were struggling. Kamui Woods was trying to create a barrier, but the crystals shredded his wood. Death Arms was trying to close the distance, but the shrapnel kept him pinned. Then, the sky seemed to darken as denim ribbons descended from the rooftops. "Restrain yourself," a calm, authoritative voice echoed over the chaos. Best Jeanist dropped from the sky, landing with practiced grace on a streetlight. He raised his hands, and the fibers of the civilian's clothes tightened, gently pulling them out of harm's way, while thick cables of carbon fiber shot from his sleeves toward the villain. "It's Best Jeanist!" Someone screamed in relief. The villain snarled, seeing the number 4 hero. "You think string can hold me?" "Steel is strong," Jeanist intoned, his face obscured by his high collar, "but the weave endures." The cables wrapped around the villain, binding his arms. But the villain grinned. His body began to glow, the crystal spikes on his skin vibrating. "Get down!" Jeanist shouted, realizing too late what was happening. It wasn't just a physical attack. The villain could detonate his outer layer. The explosion was deafening. Razor-sharp shards of crystal flew in every direction, cutting through the carbon fibers, cutting through signs, cutting through walls. Inko Midoriya didn't think. She didn't calculate. She saw the glittering death flying toward her son, and she moved. She threw herself over Izuku, wrapping her body around his small form, shielding him with everything she had. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut. He felt his mother jerk violently, once, twice, 3 times. He heard a wet choke sound, then silence. The dust settled. The villain was unconscious, knocked out by a follow-up smash from Death Arms, who had found an opening. The sirens wailed. "Mom?" Izuku whispered. He was pressed against the pavement, the smell of asphalt and blood filling his nose. "Mom, it's over." Jeanist got him. Inko didn't move. Her weight was heavy on him. Too heavy. "Mom?" He wiggled out from under her. He sat up, his hands trembling. He looked at her. The back of her green cardigan, the one she had knitted herself, was in tatters. And beneath it, Izuku screamed. It was a sound that tore his throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated loss that cut through the noise of the crowd and reached the ears of the heroes. Best Jeanist, panting slightly from the exertion, turned his head. He saw the small boy with green hair, shaking the woman lying prone on the ground. He saw the garment bag lying nearby, spilled open to reveal the very repair work he had commissioned. He recognized the stitching. He recognized the woman. Tsunaga Hakamata, the impeccable Best Jeanist, felt a thread in his heart snap. He walked over, his boots crunching on the glass. He knelt beside the boy. He didn't say everything was going to be okay. He didn't smile. He took off his denim jacket and gently laid it over Inko Midoriya, covering the horror. "Look at me," Jeanist said. His voice was strict, commanding, but not unkind. Izuku looked up, his face streaked with tears and grime. He couldn't breathe. He was hyperventilating. "Breathe," Jeanist ordered. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. "Control your center." She won't." "I know," Jeanist said softly. He placed a gloved hand on Izuku's shoulder. "I am sorry. I was too slow." It was an admission heroes rarely made. But looking at the freelance seamstress who had maintained his image for years, lying dead because he hadn't bound the villain's detonation fast enough, Tsunaga couldn't lie. The funeral was a blur of black umbrellas and whispered condolences. Izuku stood by the grave, feeling like he was underwater. He was wearing a suit that was too small for him, the sleeves riding up his arms. He felt ridiculous. He felt empty. Mitsuki Bakugo was there, crying loudly, holding a furious and confused Katsuki by the collar. But even the Bakugos couldn't take him. Their house was small, their finances tight, and Mitsuki admitted through tears that she wasn't equipped to help a traumatized child right now, not with her own volatile household. Izuku was destined for the foster system. The social worker, a tired woman with graying hair, stood near the gate, waiting to take him away. Then, a sleek, matte black limousine pulled up to the curb. The door opened, and Tsunaga Hakamata stepped out. He was dressed in a civilian suit, a charcoal 3-piece that fit him so perfectly it looked painted on. Beside him was a younger man, perhaps in his mid-20s. The younger man looked like a sharper, more severe version of the hero. He had the same blonde hair, though cut in an asymmetrical, trendy style, and he wore rectangular glasses that caught the light. He wore a dark turtleneck and a tailored blazer with a tape measure draped loosely around his neck like a scarf. This was Seiji Hakamata, the son of the fiber hero. The crowd parted. Even at a funeral, A top 10 hero commanded the atmosphere. Tsunaga walked straight to the grave, placed a single white camellia on the stone, and bowed his head. Then, he turned to the social worker. I will be taking custody of the boy, Tsunaga said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. The social worker blinked. Excuse me? Mr. Hakamada, you're a pro-hero. A single man. The vetting process is already underway. My lawyers have filed the paperwork, Tsunaga said smoothly. Inko Midoriya was an employee of the Hakamada agency, in a manner of speaking. We look after our own. But Father, Seiji spoke up. His voice was crisp, dry, and sounded bored. You are on patrol 18 hours a day. You live in a dorm at the agency half the week. Are you planning to keep the child in a filing cabinet? Tsunaga turned to his son. The resemblance was striking, though Seiji lacked the hero's stoicism. Seiji's face was twisted in a grimace of annoyance. I am not raising him, Seiji, Tsunaga said calmly. You are. Seiji choked on air. I beg your pardon? You live in the penthouse. You have 3 empty bedrooms. You work from home. And you need to learn responsibility beyond meeting Fashion Week deadlines. I am 26 years old. I run a multi-million yen design firm. I am not a babysitter. Seiji hissed, keeping his voice low so the mourners wouldn't hear. And look at him. He's vibrating. He's a mess. I don't do messy, father. I do precision. Tsunaga looked at Izuku. The boy was staring at his shoes, tears dripping onto the scuffed leather. He is frayed, Tsunaga said quietly to his son. The fabric of his life has been torn apart. You are the best designer in Japan, Seiji. You fix things. You take raw materials and make them into something durable. Seiji looked at his father, then at the boy. He adjusted his glasses. He looked at the terrible, ill-fitting suit Izuku was wearing. He twitched. That hemline is an atrocity, Seiji muttered. Fix it, Tsunaga said. Seiji sighed, a long, suffering sound. He walked over to Izuku. He towered over the 7-year-old. Midoriya Izuku, Seiji said. Izuku flinched and looked up. Why yes? Seiji crouched down, ignoring the mud getting on his expensive Italian shoes. He looked Izuku in the eye. My father has a hero complex. He saves people. That is his job. My job is making sure people look the part while they are being saved. Do you understand? Izuku nodded slowly, though he didn't really understand. You have no one, Seiji stated bluntly. It was cruel, but honest. And my father feels guilty because he wasn't fast enough. So you are coming to live with us. I have rules. Don't touch my drafting table. Don't eat sticky candy on the sofa. And for the love of aesthetics, burn that suit immediately. Izuku sniffled. Oh, okay. Seiji stood up and extended a hand. His fingers were long, slender, and callous from needlework. Come along. We have to get you fitted. The Hakamada penthouse was located in the center of the city, the top floor of the Hakamada Design Tower. It was less of a home and more of a museum of modern art. Everything was white chrome or glass. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the skyline that would make anyone dizzy. Izuku stood in the foyer, holding a small plastic bag that contained the few belongings retrieved from his ruined apartment. He was terrified to move. His sneakers were dirty. The floor was pristine white marble. Shoes off, Seiji called out from the living room. Slippers are in the cabinet to your left. Gray for guests. Navy for residents. You take the navy. Izuku fumbled with his laces, his hands shaking. He put on the navy slippers. They were soft, high-quality wool. He shuffled into the living room. One wall was entirely dominated by rolls of fabric, bolts of silk, Kevlar, denim, spandex, leather, and materials Izuku couldn't even name. In the center of the room was a massive glass table covered in sketches, holographic projectors, and fabric swatches. Seiji was already working, sketching furiously on a tablet. He had removed his blazer, revealing a holster system around his shoulders that held scissors, pins, and chalk instead of guns. Your room is the second door on the right, Seiji said without looking up. I had a bed delivered this morning. It's likely too firm, but good posture starts during sleep. Go unpack. Then shower. You smell like a graveyard. Izuku walked down the hallway. The room was huge. Bigger than his old living room. It had a bed, a desk, and a wardrobe. It was completely empty of personality. No All Might posters. No toys. He sat on the bed and opened his plastic bag. He pulled out a scorched, half-burnt notebook, his hero analysis for the future Volume 1. He pulled out a framed photo of him and his mom. The glass was cracked. He hugged the photo to his chest and cried. He cried until his throat burned. He cried until he fell asleep, curled up in a ball on top of the expensive duvet. He woke up hours later. It was dark. The city lights outside were glowing. There was a silhouette in the doorway. Seiji was leaning against the frame, holding a mug of steaming tea. "You skipped dinner," Seiji said. "I'm not hungry," Izuku croaked. Seiji walked into the room and placed the tea on the bedside table. "Honey and ginger. Good for the throat. Drink it." Izuku sat up, wiping his eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Seiji." "Just Seiji. Mr. Hakamada is my father." Seiji sat in the desk chair, spinning it around to face the bed. He looked tired. "I went through your bag while you were asleep." Izuku froze. "My notebook? It's rudimentary," Seiji critiqued. "Your drawings are scribbles. But your observations on quirk mechanics are surprisingly decent for a toddler." "I'm 7, Izuku defended weakly. "Same thing." Seiji crossed his legs. "I also saw your clothes. All Might t-shirts. All Might pajamas. All Might underwear. It's obsessive, tacky, and frankly, poorly made merchandise. Polyester blends? Disgusting." "I like All Might," Izuku whispered. "He saves everyone with a smile." "He saves everyone with brute force," Seiji corrected. "And he dresses like an American flag threw up on a bodybuilder." "But that's beside the point." Seiji leaned forward, his glasses reflecting the city lights. "My father told me about your diagnosis. Quirkless." Izuku shrank back against the headboard. This was it. This was the part where he was told to give up. To be realistic. To stop dreaming. "I'm sorry," Izuku said, the old apology tumbling out. "I know I'm useless." Seiji frowned. It was a sharp, angular expression. "Useless? Who told you that?" "Everyone. Kaken. The doctors. Without a quirk, I can't be a hero. I can't do anything." Seiji stood up abruptly. He paced the room, agitated. "That is the most idiotic thing I have ever heard. And I listen to hero marketing teams for a living." He stopped and pointed a long finger at Izuku. "Look at me, Izuku. Do I have a quirk?" Izuku blinked. I don't know. Your best jeanist son. Biologically, yes. But regarding quirks? My father can manipulate fibers telekinetically. He can control denim as if it were an extension of his own body. It is a powerful emitter type." Seiji tapped his own chest. "I, on the other hand, have a minor mutation. My eyes can zoom in like a microscope. That's it. I can see the thread count of a shirt from across the room. Can I lift a car? No. Can I shoot fire? No. In a fight, I am functionally quirkless." Izuku stared at him. "But, your dad is the number 4 hero, and I am the CEO of Hakamada Designs," Seiji snapped. "I design the suits that keep the number 4 hero alive. I design the fireproof weave for Endeavor. I design the impact-dampening salves for Ingenium. I am not a hero, but I am essential." Seiji walked over to the bed and sat on the edge. His voice dropped, losing some of its harsh edge. "A quirk is just a tool, Izuku. Like a hammer or a sewing needle. Some people are born with a hammer attached to their arm. Good for them. But if you are born empty-handed, does that mean you cannot build?" Izuku looked down at his hands. No, Seiji affirmed. "It means you have to go out and find a tool. Or better yet, you build one yourself." Seiji reached into his pocket and pulled out a spool of thread. It wasn't normal thread. It shimmered with a metallic silver glint. "This is carbon nanotube reinforced wire. Thinner than human hair, stronger than steel cable. My father uses his quirk to manipulate it. I cannot manipulate it with my mind." "But," Seiji reached into his other pocket and pulled out a small, complex-looking device. It looked like a motorized wristband. I built this. A high-torque micro-winch. With this, I can fire this wire, wrap a target, and retract it with enough force to snap a concrete pillar. He tossed the device onto Izuku's lap. It was heavy. Cold. You want to be a hero? Seiji asked. Fine. But you aren't going to be All Might. You can't be a tank. You don't have the engine for it. So stop trying to copy a pattern that doesn't fit your fabric. Izuku traced the metal of the device. Then, what do I do? You learn the family trade, Seiji said, standing up and smoothing his turtleneck. You learn to sew. You learn to analyze. You learn that precision beats power every single time. We will tailor you, Izuku. We will cut away the fear and the weakness, and we will stitch you into something new. Seiji walked to the door. He paused, his hand on the light switch. Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. We start with physical conditioning. And we are burning those onesies. I have already ordered you a wardrobe of fitted cotton and linen. If you represent this house, you will dress like it. Seiji? What? Thank you, Seiji huffed. Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen the training schedule. He flipped the switch, plunging the room into darkness. Good night, Izuku. 3 months later, the transition was not smooth. Izuku cried often. He had nightmares about glass and explosions. He missed his mother's soft cooking. Seiji ordered high-protein takeout, or cooked meals that were nutritionally perfect but tasted like cardboard. But slowly, a routine formed. The Hakamada household was a place of discipline. Tsunaga visited on Sundays. It was a terrifying affair. The number 4 hero would sit in the living room, drinking tea with his mask off, looking tired and human. He would ask Izuku about his grades. He would ask Seiji about business, and then, he would train them. It was a Sunday afternoon, and the furniture had been pushed back. Again, Tsunaga said calmly. Izuku lay on the floor, panting. He was tangled in a web of denim ribbons that Tsunaga had lazily flicked from his own jeans. I can't, Izuku wheezed. You can, Tsunaga said. You are thinking linearly. You are trying to pull away. The more you pull against a knot, the tighter it becomes. Seiji was sitting on the sofa, critiquing. His stance is too wide, father. He has no center of gravity. Quiet, Seiji, Tsunaga said. He looked down at Izuku. Izuku. Don't fight the fabric. Understand it. Where is the tension? Where is the slack? Izuku stopped struggling. He closed his eyes. He felt the denim wrapped around his wrist. He felt the weight Tsunaga was holding the other end. There was a slight vibration. The loop is loose on the left thumb. Izuku didn't pull. He twisted. He rotated his wrist inward, creating a millimeter of slack, then jerked his arm towards Tsunaga, disrupting the hero's tension. The knot slipped. Izuku rolled free. Tsunaga raised an eyebrow. A rare expression of surprise. Good. I did it. Izuku beamed. You escaped a capture restraint from a hero using 1% of his power, Seiji drawled. Don't plan the parade yet. But Seiji was smiling. Just a little. Later that evening, Seiji called Izuku into his workspace. The sanctuary, as he called it. Come here, Seiji commanded. Izuku approached the drafting table. On it lay a schematic. I have been observing your movements, Seiji said. You are small. Fast. You have a habit of analyzing your opponent before you engage. It causes you to hesitate. I know, Izuku muttered. We turn that hesitation into preparation. Seiji tapped the schematic. I am designing your first support item. It is a training tool. He pulled a box from under the table. Inside were 2 gloves. They were sleek, green and black, made of a material Izuku didn't recognize. On the fingertips were small metallic nodes. Binding wire gloves, Mark 1, Seiji explained. They connect to a spool mounted on your belt. You can control the release and retraction of carbon fiber wires with finger gestures. It's a simplified version of what I use, and a technological mockery of what my father does. Izuku put them on. They fit perfectly. Like a second skin. Why? Izuku asked. Why are you doing this for me? Seiji looked at him over the rim of his glasses. He picked up a piece of chalk and twirled it. Because the world is full of cheap, mass-produced heroes, Izuku. Loud, flashy, and poorly made. They tear under pressure. Seiji walked over and adjusted the collar of Izuku's shirt, straightening it obsessively. You are a custom job. And Hakamadas do not release a product until it is perfect. Izuku looked at his hands clad in the gloves. He made a fist, and he heard the faint whir of the mechanism engaging. He didn't feel weak. He didn't feel quirkless. He felt equipped. Now, Seiji said, grabbing a stack of textbooks. Math homework. Heroes must be intelligent. If you get less than a 95, you are cleaning the workshop for a month. Yes, Seiji and I. Seiji paused. Ni? Brother? He wrinkled his nose. I suppose it is acceptable. Better than Master Seiji, which would be weird. As Izuku ran off to his room to study, Seiji looked at the empty hallway. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Tsunage. Is he settling in? Best Jeanist's voice came through the line, accompanied by the sound of wind. He was on patrol. He calls me Big Brother now, Seiji sighed. And he passed the level 1 reflex test. He has potential, Jeanist said. He has the heart of a hero. We just need to give him the hands. I'm working on it, Seiji said, looking at the blueprint of the gloves. Father? Yes? He's not going to be like you. He's not going to be the fiber hero. No, Jeanist agreed. He will be something else. Seiji smiled, a sharp, predatory grin. I'm going to make him dangerous. I'm going to make him a masterpiece. Just keep him safe, Seiji. Safety is a matter of preparation. I'll make sure he's never caught with a loose thread. Seiji hung up. He looked out the window at the city below. Somewhere out there were villains. Somewhere out there was the man who killed Inko Midoriya, incarcerated now, but the memory remained. And somewhere out there was UA High School. 10 years, Seiji whispered to the empty room. Give me 10 years, and I'll dress him for greatness. He sat back down at his desk, picked up his needle, and began to sew. 4 years later, age 11, Aldera Junior High was a noisy, chaotic place. The bell rang, signaling lunch. Katsuki Bakugo kicked his desk, propping his feet up. Hey, Deku! Still dreaming of UA? You know they don't accept quirkless rejects, right? The class snickered. It was the same old routine. Izuku Midoriya sat at his desk. But he didn't flinch. He didn't hunch his shoulders. He was wearing his school uniform, but it was different. It was tailored. The blazer was taken in at the waist to reduce drag. The pants were hemmed perfectly to avoid tripping. His tie was a perfect Windsor knot. Izuku closed his notebook. He stood up, picked up his bag, and looked at Bakugo. The UA admission guidelines removed the quirk restriction clause 3 years ago, Katsuki, Izuku said calmly. His voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. And the support course has always been open, but I'm aiming for heroics. Bakugo scoffed, small explosions popping in his palms. You gonna fight villains with a calculator? You're useless. You're a pebble on the side of the road. Bakugo lunged. It was a telegraphed right hook, fueled by anger and arrogance. Izuku didn't panic. He saw the shift in Bakugo's weight. He saw the tension in the shoulder. Sloppy, Izuku thought. The seam of his attack is wide open. Izuku stepped to the left. A pivot of exactly 45 degrees. Bakugo's fist sailed past his ear. As Bakugo stumbled forward, carried by his own momentum, Izuku's hand shot out. He didn't punch. He grabbed the back of Bakugo's collar and the belt loop of his pants. With a simple shift of leverage, using Bakugo's own force against him, Izuku guided him into the nearest wall. Thump. It wasn't a violent slam. It was a restraint. Bakugo was pinned, face against the chalkboard, confused as to how he got there. Get off me! Bakugo roared. Izuku released him immediately and stepped back out of range, brushing invisible dust off his sleeve. Your form is disintegrating, Katsuki, Izuku said, channeling a bit of Seiji's haughtiness. You rely too much on the explosion and not enough on the delivery. If you swing like that at UA, you'll be expelled on the first day. The class went silent. Deku fought back? And he didn't even use a quirk? Bakugo turned around, his face red with fury. You look down on me? I'm analyzing you, Izuku corrected. He adjusted his glasses, fake ones, non-prescription frames. Seiji insisted he wear to look more intellectual and less like a victim. I have to go. Izuku checked his watch. My brother is expecting me for a fitting. We're testing a new carbon weave alloy today. Have a productive afternoon, Katsuki. Izuku walked out of the classroom, his back straight, his stride purposeful. As he walked down the hall, his heart was hammering in his chest. He was still scared. He was still the boy who cried when his mom died. But he checked his pocket. Inside was a small spool of high-tensile wire. He wasn't All Might. He wasn't born with power, but he was a Hakamata now. And he was tailored for this. Age 8, the needle and the knot. The first year in the Hakamata penthouse was measured not in days, but in stitches. For 8-year-old Izuku Midoriya, the world had shrunk from the chaotic, colorful sprawl of a child's imagination to the precise, monochromatic rigor of Seiji Hakamata's design studio. The grieving period was not ignored, but it was structured. Seiji did not believe in wallowing. He believed in reconstruction. Posture, Izuku. If you slump over the machine, your stitch line will wander. A wandering line is a sign of a wandering mind. Izuku straightened his back, his small feet barely touching the pedal of the industrial sewing machine. Yes, Seiji and I. The room smelled of ozone and starched cotton. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air, motes that Seiji would inevitably vacuum up within the hour. You are frustrated, Seiji observed from his own drafting table across the room. He didn't look up from the tablet he was sketching on, yet he saw everything. I can't get the hem straight, Izuku admitted, his voice trembling slightly. The fabric keeps bunching up. Seiji set down his stylus. He stood up, a tall, slender figure in a charcoal turtleneck and tailored slacks. He walked over to Izuku, his movements fluid and efficient. He placed a hand on the fabric, a heavy-duty Kevlar weave intended for a sidekick's patrol jacket. You are fighting the material, Seiji said, his voice dropping to a teaching register. You are trying to force it to be flat. But this is Kevlar. It has a memory. It wants to curl. You must guide it, not conquer it. He placed his hand over Izuku's small hand, guiding the fabric under the presser foot. Feel the tension, Seiji instructed. A hero's costume is the last line of defense between them and death. If this seam bursts because you were impatient, a villain's knife gets through. Do you understand the weight of that? Izuku swallowed hard. The responsibility felt heavy on his chest, heavier than the grief he carried for his mother. Yes. If I mess up, people get hurt. Correct. But do not let that paralyze you. Let it focus you. The needle hammered down, thrum thrum thrum. Under Seiji's guidance, the line ran true. Straight. Unbreakable. This was the first lesson of the Hakamata household. Precision is protection. Izuku wasn't allowed to train his body yet. Seiji insisted that a vessel must be designed before it could be reinforced. So, for the first year, Izuku learned the theory of support. He learned the difference between tensile strength and shear strength. He learned why All Might's costumes were made of an elastic tripolymer blend, to accommodate muscle expansion, and why Endeavor's suits required heat-dissipating ceramic plating. He also learned that being quirkless didn't mean his mind was empty. One evening, while Seiji was fitting a client, a minor hero named Backdraft, Izuku sat in the corner with a notebook. It wasn't his old, charred notebook. It was a new one, bound in high-quality leather, a gift from Seiji. The kid's staring at me, Backdraft grumbled, adjusting his water hose gauntlets. It's creepy. He is analyzing, Seiji corrected, pinning the hem of the hero's coat. Izuku, what do you see? Izuku looked up, adjusting the non-prescription glasses Seiji made him wear to elevate his aesthetic. His center of gravity is too high, Izuku piped up. The water tanks on his back are mounted near his shoulders. If he turns too fast, the centrifugal force will throw him off balance. And the hoses, they're exposed at the elbow joint. A villain with a cutting quirk could sever his water supply easily. Backdraft blinked. He looked at his elbows. He looked at Seiji. Is the kid right? Seiji smirked, a rare, sharp expression. He is usually right. I'll redesign the mounting brackets to lower the weight distribution. And we'll add armored plating to the hose joints. Added cost, of course. Of course, Backdraft sighed. That night, Seiji gave Izuku an extra serving of katsudon, homemade, with high-quality pork. It was the closest thing to a hug Seiji ever gave. Age 10, the architecture of the body. By 10, the physical transformation began. Izuku stood in the center of the penthouse's private gym. It looked less like a weight room and more like a torture chamber designed by Apple. Everything was white, chrome, and terrifyingly clean. Your diagnosis, Seiji began, pacing around Izuku like a shark circling prey, stated that you have the double toe joint. A vestigial trait. It implies a lack of quirk evolution. However, biologically it also implies you are built for running. Izuku looked at his feet, clad in custom-molded running shoes. Running away? Running towards, Seiji corrected. Or flanking. Or repositioning. You are small, Izuku. You will likely remain smaller than average until your late teens. You cannot be a tank. You cannot trade blows with a villain who can punch through concrete. If you get hit, you break. So, the strategy is simple. Do not be there when the punch arrives. The training regime Seiji devised was brutal. It wasn't about bulking up, it was about functional strength, flexibility, and spatial awareness. Parkour became Izuku's religion. Musudafu was a vertical city, full of fire escapes, rooftops, and narrow alleys. Every morning at 5 a.m., before the city woke up, Seiji would take Izuku out. From here to the water tower, Seiji would point. Do not touch the ground. Izuku would run. He learned to vault over AC units. He learned to wall run for 3 steps to bridge a gap. He learned to roll upon landing to disperse impact. At first, he fell. A lot. His knees were constantly scraped, his palms raw. But Seiji was always there with the first aid kit, and a critique. You hesitated at the railing, Seiji would say, applying disinfectant with the precision of a surgeon. Hesitation is friction. Friction slows you down. Trust your grip. But what if I fall? Izuku asked, wincing as the alcohol stung. Then you fall, Seiji said simply. And then you get up. Gravity is a law, Izuku. You obey it, or you exploit it. There is no middle ground. To supplement the physical training, Seiji introduced the fiber arts. It started with cat's cradle. Then knot tying. Then, learning to manipulate a whip. My father controls fibers with his mind, Seiji explained one afternoon, holding a length of braided carbon nanotube rope. He can make them dance. You cannot. You must use physics. Angular momentum, centrifugal force. Friction. He handed the rope to Izuku. Hit the target. The target was a mannequin head 10 feet away. Izuku cracked the whip. It flailed wildly and hit him in the shin. He yelped. Again, Seiji ordered. Izuku tried again. And again. For weeks, he learned that the wrist motion had to be a snap, not a pull. He learned that the wire was an extension of his arm. He learned to listen to the sound of the wire cutting the air. A whoosh meant it was too slow. A sharp crack meant it was breaking the sound barrier at the tip. 6 months in, Izuku stood in the gym. He held the rope. He took a breath, visualizing the path. Snap! The tip of the rope lashed out, wrapping perfectly around the mannequin's neck. With a jerk of his wrist, Izuku pulled. The mannequin toppled over. Seiji, who had been reading a fashion magazine in the corner, looked up over his glasses. Acceptable, he said. Now do it while jumping over a hurdle. Age 12, the weaver and the wires. It was a rainy Sunday when best jeanist, Tsunaga Hakamada, came for his monthly inspection. The relationship between Izuku and the number 4 hero was complex. Tsunaga was not dad. He was Hakamada-sama or master jeanist. He was a distant, towering figure of denim and discipline. He was the standard Izuku was striving to meet, yet knew he could never fully replicate. But Tsunaga had taken an interest. He saw something in the boy, a frantic, desperate drive that reminded him of a young All Might, but tempered by Seiji's cold, analytical upbringing. Seiji tells me you have mastered the static capture, Tsunaga said. He was sitting on the white leather sofa, sipping Earl Grey tea. He was out of costume, wearing a simple, high-collared sweater, but his presence filled the room. I think so, sir, Izuku stammered. He stood at attention, hands at his sides, dressed in a crisp button-up shirt and slacks. Thinking is not doing. Show me. They moved to the training room. Tsunaga stood in the center of the mats. He raised a single hand. From the sleeve of his sweater, a single thread of denim unspooled, hovering in the air like a snake. I will use this single thread, Tsunaga said. You will use your training gear. Your objective is to restrain my left wrist. My objective is to stop you. Izuku gulped. He reached to his belt. By age 12, Seiji had fabricated the Mark II binding gauntlets. They were bulky, looking like oversized wristwatches connected to a reel on his belt. They housed 50 meters of microfilament wire. Begin, Tsunaga said softly. Izuku didn't yell. He didn't telegraph. He moved. He slid to the right, firing a wire from his left gauntlet. The motorized winch whined, zzzzzt, as the wire shot toward Tsunaga's arm. Tsunaga didn't move his feet. He simply twitched his finger. The denim thread intercepted Izuku's wire, batting it aside as if it were a fly. Too direct, Tsunaga critiqued. A straight line is the easiest path to predict. Izuku gritted his teeth. He retracted the wire, the motor pulling him slightly off balance, and fired again, this time aiming for a pillar next to Tsunaga. The wire wrapped around the pillar. Izuku engaged the winch, launching himself into the air. Better, Tsunaga noted. Mid-air, Izuku fired a second wire from his right hand. He was above Tsunaga now. The angle was steep. Tsunaga looked up. His denim thread spiraled upward, forming a small shield. Izuku's wire deflected off it. Izuku landed in a roll, panting. You rely on the machine, Tsunaga observed. The machine has a delay. The motor takes 0.2 seconds to engage. In that time, a villain has already killed you. Then what do I do? Izuku asked, frustration bubbling up. I don't have a quirk. I can't make the wire move instantly. You anticipate, Tsunaga said. You do not react to where I am. You react to where I will be. Tsunaga stepped forward. Again, they spared for an hour. Izuku was battered, bruised, and exhausted. He hadn't landed a single capture. That is enough, Seiji called out from the doorway. He walked in, holding a towel and a bottle of water. His heart rate is spiking. Diminishing returns. Tsunaga nodded and recalled his thread. He looked at Izuku, who was lying on the floor, staring at the ceiling lights. You have the instincts of a brawler, Tsunaga said. You want to rush in. You want to save everyone immediately. That is noble. That is what All Might does. Tsunaga walked over and offered a hand to pull Izuku up. But you are not All Might, Izuku. You are a Hakamata. We do not brawl. We curate the battlefield. We control the environment. He tapped Izuku's chest. When you fight, you are sewing a tapestry. Every movement is a stitch. If you rush the stitch, the picture is ruined. Slow down your mind. Speed up your hands. Izuku looked at his trembling hands. Yes, sir. However, Tsunaga added, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips beneath his high collar. Your recovery roll was excellent. Your posture remains straight even when fatigued. That is good. It was a crumb of praise, but to Izuku, it was a feast. That night, Izuku didn't sleep. He sat at his desk, dismantling his Mark II gauntlets. The motor lag, he thought. 0.2 seconds. Jeanist is right. It's too slow. He pulled out his tools, jeweler's screwdrivers and tweezers. If I preload the tension, if I use a spring-loaded firing mechanism for the initial launch instead of the motor, I can cut that down to 0.05 seconds. He worked through the night. When Seiji found him the next morning, slumped over the desk, drooling on a schematic, the Mark IIs had been modified. Seiji picked up the gauntlet, inspected the new spring mechanism, and smiled. Sloppy soldering, Seiji whispered, placing a blanket over the boy. But brilliant engineering. Age 13, Aldera Junior High and the psychological warfare. Middle school was a different kind of battlefield. Aldera Junior High was loud, dirty, and filled with the kind of teenage angst that Seiji described as aesthetically offensive. Izuku Midoriya was an anomaly. He didn't slouch. He didn't run in the halls. He wore his uniform with a disturbing level of perfection, blazer pressed, tie in a double Windsor, shoes polished to a mirror shine. He carried a leather satchel instead of a backpack, and he didn't cower. "Oi, Deku!" Katsuki Bakugo kicked Izuku's desk. The explosion left a scorch mark on the wood. "Good morning, Katsuki," Izuku said, not looking up from his advanced calculus textbook. "You're scorching the varnish. The school budget won't cover that." Bakugo's eyes narrowed. This was the new dynamic. For years, Bakugo had tried to bully the quirkless freak. He had tried to beat him down. But Izuku didn't break. He just absorbed it. He treated Bakugo's rage like bad weather, something to be endured with an umbrella. "Don't ignore me, you nerd! I heard you're still applying to UA. "I am," Izuku said calmly. "You're quirkless. You're gonna get crushed. You can't be a hero without power." Izuku finally looked up. Behind his glasses, his green eyes were cool, analytical. "Power is a variable, Katsuki. Not the equation." "What the hell does that mean?" Izuku stood up. He was shorter than Bakugo, slimmer. But he held himself with the posture of a runway model. "It means that while you are generating 4,000 kilocalories of explosive force," Izuku said, pointing to Bakugo's sweating palms, "you are also telegraphing your right hook by dropping your left shoulder. You have a blind spot on your lower right quadrant because you squint when you detonate. And your stance is wide, leaving your center of gravity vulnerable to a sweep." The class went silent. Bakugo vibrated with rage. Sparks popped on his skin. "You think you can take me? I'll kill you." "I think," Izuku said, checking his watch, "that if you engage in unauthorized quirk usage on school grounds again, it will go on your permanent record. Yui does not look kindly on disciplinary infractions. Do you really want to risk your admission just to singe my blazer? Its fire retardant will blend, by the way." Seiji made it. Bakugo froze. The threat to his Yui chances was the only thing that could pause him. "You look down on me," Bakugo hissed, leaning in close. "You always have. You think you're better than me just because you live in a tower with that jean-wearing freak." "I don't think I'm better," Izuku said softly. "I just think I'm prepared. And you are just loud." Bakugo slammed his hand on the desk, creating a massive explosion that filled the room with smoke. When the smoke cleared, Izuku was gone. He had slipped out the back door during the visual obstruction. In the hallway, Izuku leaned against a locker, his heart hammering against his ribs. He was shaking. That was terrifying. He almost took my head off. He adjusted his tie. He smoothed his hair. "Control," he whispered to himself. "Image. Do not let them see you fray." He walked to the nurse's office to get an ice pack for his hands, which were trembling uncontrollably. He wasn't brave. He was just a really, really good actor. Age 14, the masterpiece. 10 months before the UA entrance exam. The atmosphere in the Hakamata penthouse was electric. Seiji had cleared his entire schedule for the week. "It is time," Seiji announced. Izuku sat on a stool in the center of the workshop. He was stripped down to his compression shorts. He was 14 now. His body was lean, corded with swimmer's muscle. His arms were scarred from wire cuts and training accidents. "The Mark V gauntlets are complete," Seiji said, unveiling a glass case. They were beautiful. Sleek, matte black with emerald green accents. They were slimmer than the previous models, hugging the forearm. High-density carbon fiber casing, Seiji listed off. Dual spool system. Main line, 40 meters of braided nanotube wire, capable of supporting 2 tons. Secondary line, 10 meters of conductive copper weave for taser applications, non-lethal voltage, naturally. And the firing mechanism is magnetic. Silent. Instant. Izuku touched the glass. "They're amazing." "They are tools," Seiji corrected. "Tools are only as good as the user." "But the suit." "The suit is the statement." Seiji walked to a mannequin covered in a silk sheet. "We went through 20 iterations. We tried to copy All Might. Too bulky. We tried to copy my father. Too restrictive for your fighting style. You need mobility. You need stealth. But you also need to inspire hope." Seiji pulled the sheet away. Izuku gasped. It wasn't a jumpsuit. It was a tactical suit that looked like high fashion. The base was a dark, forest green bodysuit made of a ballistic weave, flexible but knife-resistant. Over that was a cropped jacket made of heavy, dark denim, a homage to the Hakamata legacy. The collar was high, protecting the neck, standing stiff and regal. The pants were cargo-style but tailored, with pockets for support gear, flash bangs, and medical supplies. The boots were reinforced with steel toes and shock-absorbing heels for high drops, but the most striking detail was the belt. It was red. A bright, vibrant red utility belt. The red, Izuku whispered. Like his shoes. Like your old sneakers, Seiji corrected gently. And yes, a nod to the symbol of peace. We acknowledge the inspiration, but we tailor it to the reality. Seiji picked up the jacket. Try it on. Izuku stepped into the suit. It fit like a second skin. It felt right. He zipped up the jacket. He clicked the red belt into place. He slid the gauntlets onto his arms. He looked in the mirror. He didn't look like Deku anymore. He didn't look like the scared kid at the funeral. He looked like a hero. How does it feel? Seiji asked, standing behind him, adjusting the shoulder pads slightly. It feels heavy, Izuku admitted. Good. It should. It carries the reputation of my agency. It carries your mother's memory. And it carries your future. Seiji turned Izuku around and handed him a mask. It was a metal respirator mask, painted green, designed to filter toxins and conceal his identity. You are corkless, Izuku. The world will try to break you. The villains will target you because you look weak. The media will eat you alive if you fail. Seiji placed his hands on Izuku's shoulders. But you are wearing a Hakamata original. And Hakamata designs never tear. Izuku gripped the mask. Tears welled up in his eyes. Don't cry, Seiji scolded, though he was smiling. Salt water stains the fabric. I won't, Izuku sniffed, wiping his eyes carefully. I'm ready, Seiji and I. Then let's go, Seiji said, grabbing his car keys. Tsunaga is waiting at Dagoba Beach. He wants to see if the suit holds up against a 50% power smash. Izuku paled. Wait, 50%? Last week it was 10%. Inflation, Seiji shrugged. Welcome to the hero industry. The final test, Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. The beach was a garbage dump. Mountains of trash piled high, blocking the view of the ocean. This is disgusting, Seiji noted, standing on the seawall, holding a handkerchief to his nose. Why are we here? Terrain advantage, Tsunaga's voice echoed from atop a pile of old refrigerators. Best Jeanist stood silhouetted against the setting sun. The wind whipped his long blonde hair. The entrance exam is in 2 weeks, Tsunaga called out. You have the gear. You have the training. Now show me the heart. Start. Tsunaga didn't hold back. He raised his hands, and the fibers of the trash piles, old sofas, discarded clothes, rugs, came to life. A tsunami of fabric surged toward Izuku. Izuku didn't run. He tapped his gauntlets. Click. 2 wires shot out, latching onto a lamppost high above the trash. With a hiss of magnetic acceleration, Izuku launched himself into the air, soaring over the wave of garbage. Aerial maneuverability, Tsunaga noted. Good. Tsunaga flicked a finger. A stray rope from the pile lashed out like a viper, aiming to snag Izuku's ankle. Izuku twisted in midair. He fired a 3rd wire from his boot, a new addition Seiji had surprised him with, anchoring himself to a fridge. He used the tension to swing sharply downward, dodging the rope. He landed in a crouch on top of a washing machine. You are defensive! Tsunaga shouted, sending 3 more tendrils of denim at him. A hero must win. How will you win? Izuku analyzed the battlefield. The trash was unstable. Tsunaga was standing on top of a precarious stack. Jeanist controls fibers. He doesn't control gravity. Izuku dodged left, rolling under a flying sofa. He popped up and fired both gauntlets. But he didn't aim at Jeanist. He aimed at the base of the trash pile Jeanist was standing on. He wrapped the wires around the bottom appliances, a stove and a dryer. He planted his feet. He engaged the high-torque winches to maximum power. Pull! Izuku screamed. The wires went taut. The metal groaned. With a massive crunch, the base of the pile shifted. The mountain of trash collapsed. Tsunaga's eyes widened. He lost his footing. He tried to catch himself with threads, but the debris was falling too fast. He tumbled down the slide of garbage, landing gracefully but decidedly on the ground. Izuku stood atop the washing machine, panting, his wires still smoking from the heat of the friction. Tsunaga dusted off his shoulder. He looked up at the boy. Structural destabilization, Tsunaga mused. You didn't attack the man. You attacked his foundation. Seiji was clapping slowly from the seawall. And he didn't ruin the suit. Excellent. Tsunaga walked over to Izuku. The sun was setting, casting long shadows. You are ready, the number 4 hero said. Really? Izuku breathed. You lack raw power, Tsunaga admitted. You always will. But you have precision. You have tactical brilliance. And today, you showed me that you have the audacity to drop a refrigerator on a pro hero. Tsunaga placed a hand on Izuku's head. Go to Yue, Izuku. Show them that strength isn't the only way to be strong. Show them the strength of a single thread. Izuku looked at his hands, his scarred, calloused, gloved hands. He thought of the sewing machine. He thought of the parkour. He thought of the nights spent studying support gear schematics. He thought of Inko. Mom, he thought. I'm not All Might. But I think I can be someone you'd be proud of. Yes, sir! Izuku shouted, bowing deeply. Good, Tsunaga said. Now clean up this beach. It's an eyesore. Izuku's jaw dropped. All of it? Consider it conditioning, Seiji called out. And don't get grease on the jacket. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Izuku Midoriya began to work, his wires humming in the twilight, sewing his future one captured piece of trash at a time. He was tailored for this, and he was ready to face the world. The final months of junior high felt like waiting for a hem to dry. It was a tedious, suspended state of existence where nothing of value was happening, yet the anticipation of the final product, Yue, high school, loomed over everything. Izuku Midoriya walked the halls of Aldera Junior High with the rhythmic clack-clack-clack of his polished dress shoes echoing against the linoleum. While other students slouched under the weight of oversized backpacks and teenage apathy, Izuku carried himself with a verticality that bordered on arrogant. It wasn't arrogance, though. It was structure. Seiji had drilled it into him. If your spine is straight, your mind is clear. If your mind is clear, you cannot be caught off guard. Oh, Deku! The shout was accompanied by the smell of nitroglycerin and burnt sugar. Katsuki Bakugo stood by the shoe lockers, his friends snickering behind him. Katsuki's uniform was a disaster, shirt untucked, tie loose, buttons straining. Izuku stopped, adjusting the strap of his leather satchel. He didn't turn fully, he simply pivoted his head, a movement efficient and minimal. Good afternoon, Katsuki. I see you've decided the dress code is merely a suggestion again. Shut up with the fashion police crap. Katsuki snarled, kicking a locker. I heard you submitted your application to Yue Hero course. You really think they're gonna let a quirkless defect in just because his daddy is a pro? The hallway went quiet. It was the sore spot. Everyone knew Izuku was the ward of the Hakamata family now. It protected him from physical bullying. Nobody wanted to be sued by best jeanist lawyers. But it didn't stop the whispers. Nepotism baby. Charity case. The pet. Izuku turned fully now. He adjusted his glasses. Frames Seiji had selected to frame his face, non-prescription but made of ballistic polycarbonate. The Hakamata agency does not ask for favors, Katsuki. We present results. If I get in, it will be because I am better prepared than you. Prepared? Katsuki's hands sparked. I have the strongest quirk in this school. You have string and a sewing kit. A quirk is raw material, Izuku recited, his voice cool. Without refinement, it is just noise. You are loud, Katsuki. You have always been loud. But noise doesn't save people. Precision does. Before Katsuki could detonate, Izuku checked his wrist, a reflex, looking at a watch that wasn't there, as he usually checked the time on his HUD during training. I have a fitting. Excuse me? Izuku walked away. He didn't run. He didn't flinch when Katsuki exploded a soda can behind him. He just kept walking, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs that his face refused to show. Deep breath, he told himself. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Maintain the silhouette. The walk home took him under the Tatooine underpass. It was a gloomy, damp tunnel that smelled of stagnant water and oil. Izuku was lost in thought, mentally reviewing the schematics for the Mark V gauntlets. Seiji was concerned about the retraction speed of the secondary winch. If they switched the gear ratio from 4:1 to 6:1, they could increase torque, but the heat generation might melt the polymer housing. Maybe a ceramic lining? No, too brittle. Titanium alloy? Too expensive, even for us. A wet, slurping sound broke his concentration. Izuku stopped. His training kicked in before his conscious mind did. His knees bent slightly, lowering his center of gravity. His hands went to his waist, hovering over the release mechanism of his concealed belt spools. A medium-sized invisibility cloak. A gurgling voice hissed. From the sewer grate, a mass of dark, viscous sludge erupted. It piled high, forming a towering wave of fluid and hate. Two manic, bulging eyes floated in the muck. You'll make a perfect skin suit, kid. Don't struggle. It'll only hurt for about 45 seconds. Izuku didn't scream. Screaming wasted oxygen. Fluid body, Izuku analyzed instantly. Amorphous. No skeletal structure. Physical strikes are useless. Capture wires will slice through him unless I can bind a solid core. The villain lunged. Izuku moved. He backflipped, his hands flashing to his belt. He drew 2 lengths of carbon fiber wire, weighted at the ends. Stay back! Izuku commanded, snapping his wrists. The wires lashed out, cutting the air with a high-pitched whine. They struck the sludge, and passed right through. The villain laughed, the sludge reforming instantly around the cut. Nice toy. But useless. The sludge slammed into Izuku. It was heavy, like being hit by a wet mattress. Izuku was thrown against the tunnel wall. The air left his lungs. Before he could recover, the sludge was on him, forcing its way into his nose and mouth. Can't breathe. Can't grip. Izuku clawed at the fluid. His fingers found no purchase. Panic, cold and sharp, began to fray the edges of his mind. Think. Seiji said. Seiji said every material has a weakness. Fluids have surface tension. Viscosity. But I can't exploit that without a chemical agent. His vision began to spot. The villain's voice was a dull roar in his ears. Is this it? After all the training? After all the early mornings? To die in a sewer like trash? No. Izuku's hand drifted to his pocket. He had a spare spool. Not wire. Kevlar thread. Thick. Rough. He couldn't bind the liquid. But he could bind the eyes. He raised his hand, his vision blurring. Suddenly, the manhole cover exploded upward. Fear not, kid! A towering figure stood backlit by the daylight streaming into the tunnel. A figure of primary colors and impossible muscle mass. For I am here, the villain shrieked. All Might? All Might didn't waste time with speeches. He drew back a fist. The air pressure in the tunnel changed instantly. Izuku felt his ears pop. Texas. Smash! The punch didn't even touch the villain. The wind pressure alone was a hurricane. The sludge was blasted apart, atomized into droplets that splattered against the concrete walls. Izuku was released. He fell to his knees, coughing up sludge, gasping for sweet, sweet air. He looked up. The number 1 hero was standing there, steaming slightly, a wide grin on his face. He was putting the villain's scattered remains into empty soda bottles with blinding speed. Apologies for getting you caught up in my justice ing. All Might boomed. I was chasing this slippery fellow through the sewer system. Good grief. Izuku wiped his mouth with a handkerchief he pulled from his pocket. Seiji would kill him if he used his sleeve. All Might, Izuku wheezed. Indeed. And you are safe. Excellent. Now, I must be off to turn this guy in. All Might turned to leave, his legs flexing to jump. Wait. Izuku scrambled up. This was it. The question. The doubt that even Seiji couldn't fully stitch shut. I need to ask. All Might launched himself into the sky. Izuku didn't think. It was the parkour training. It was the instinct to chase the objective. He fired a wire from his belt, snagging All Might's boot just as he took off. Hey! What the? They soared over the city. The wind whipped Izuku's face. Let go! I love my fans, but this is excessive. If I let go now, I'll die. Izuku screamed, the wind tearing the words from his mouth. Oh. Right. Good point. They landed on a rooftop. Izuku rolled upon impact, executing a perfect break fall, preserving his ankles and his dignity. That was reckless! All Might scolded, coughing slightly. And terrifyingly effective. You have quite the grip, young man. Support item, Izuku gasped, retracting the wire. Modified winch system. Hakamata design. Hakamata? All Might paused. Ah. Best Jeanist agency? I'm his son. Adopted. All Might blinked. I see. Well, that explains the excellent posture. But I really must go. Wait. Izuku stepped forward. He clenched his fists. Please. I have to know. Even without a quirk, even if I have to use tools and wires and strategy, can I be a hero like you? All Might stopped. Steam began to pour off his body. A hero, like me? They say I can't, Izuku said, his voice trembling. My brother says I can be a hero, but he says I can't be a symbol. He says I can't be the one who stands in the middle of the chaos and smiles because I don't have the raw power. But I want to save people. I want to be the one who arrives and makes the fear go away. Poof! The muscular figure vanished in a cloud of steam. Izuku blinked. Standing in All Might's place was a skeletal man with sunken eyes, coughing up blood. What? An imposter? No, the man rasped, wiping blood from his chin. I'm All Might. Just deflated. Izuku stared. The symbol of peace looked like a strong breeze would snap him in half. All Might sat down on the ventilation unit. He lifted his shirt, revealing a horrific, spiderweb scar on his side. 5 years ago, All Might said softly. A villain did this. Half my respiratory organs destroyed. My stomach lost. I can only do hero work for about 3 hours a day. Izuku covered his mouth. Toxic chainsaw? You know your stuff. But no. A villain the world doesn't know about. I had it covered up. All Might looked at Izuku with intense blue eyes. Pro heroes are always risking their lives. Some villains just can't be beaten without power. Without a quirk. Izuku felt cold. So, Seiji was right. Your brother sounds like a smart man. All Might sighed. Support items are incredible. Jeanist proves that technique can bridge the gap. But to be me? To be the symbol? To take a punch that can level a city and keep smiling? All Might stood up. I cannot, in good conscience, tell you to walk this path without a quirk. It's not just about winning fights. It's about surviving them. If you want to help people, become a police officer, or a doctor, or design the suits, like your family does. Those are noble professions. All Might walk to the door of the roof. It's good to have dreams, young man. But you also have to consider reality. The door clicked shut. Izuku stood alone on the roof. The wind ruffled his hair. He didn't cry. Seiji didn't like crying. It made the eyes puffy. Reality, Izuku whispered. He looked at his hands. I know reality. Reality is that my mom is dead because nobody was fast enough. He tightened his fist. I don't need to be you, All Might. I just need to be enough. An explosion rocked the city. Izuku looked up. A plume of black smoke was rising from the shopping district. The same district where he had been attacked. The villain. Did he escape? Did I knock the bottles loose when I grabbed All Might? Guilt, cold and sharp, pierced him. He began to run. Not toward safety, but toward the smoke. When he arrived, the scene was a nightmare. The shopping street was a sea of fire. The sludge villain had taken a new hostage and was barricaded in an alleyway, surrounded by flames. The pro-heroes were helpless. I can't get close. Death Arm shouted, shielding his face. The heat is too intense. My wood will burn. Kamui Woods cried. I can't fit in the alley. Empty Lady complained. Izuku pushed through the crowd. He ducked under the police tape. Hey! Kid! Get back! Izuku ignored them. He scanned the scene. His eyes, trained by Seiji's relentless drills, broke the chaos down into data. Fire source. Secondary explosions from gas lines. Villain location. Center of the alley. Hostage status, struggling. Wait. Izuku zoomed in, figuratively, squinting behind his glasses. Blonde hair. Explosions. Katsuki? The sludge villain had Katsuki. And Katsuki was fighting back. But his explosions were only feeding the fire and creating smoke screens that blinded the heroes. Katsuki's eyes met Izuku's. They weren't angry. They were terrified. They were pleading, "Help me." Izuku's feet moved. "Stop. You'll get yourself killed." Death Arms roared. Izuku didn't hear him. He was running. But he wasn't running blindly. Scenario: hostage rescue in hazardous environment. Thermal updrafts are severe. Direct approach is suicide. Izuku reached into his satchel. He pulled out two objects. First, a small, high-density metal ball. A flashbang grenade. Illegal for a civilian to carry? Technically. Essential for a Hakamata? Absolutely. Second, a spool of experimental wire. Tungsten carbide weave. Heat-resistant up to 3,000 degrees. Izuku sprinted into the fire. The heat was unbearable. His blazer began to smoke. "Katsuki! Stop exploding! You're feeding the thermal layer!" Izuku screamed. He threw the flashbang. Bang! A blinding white light stunned the villain. The sludge recoiled, shrieking. "My eyes!" In that split second of confusion, Izuku stopped running. He planted his feet. He threw the tungsten wire. He didn't aim for the villain. He aimed for the lamppost above the villain. The wire looped over the crossbar. Izuku caught the return end. He now had a pulley. He tied the end of the wire to his satchel, which was heavy with textbooks and gear. He threw the satchel over the villain's head, creating a beyond lookout effect. The wire wrapped around the sludge, biting deep. "Let him go!" Izuku yelled. He grabbed the other end of the wire and pulled with everything he had. The wire tightened. It sliced into the fluid, but more importantly, it snagged Katsuki's collar and the villain's teeth. "You, again!" The villain gurgled. "Get off him!" Izuku gritted his teeth, digging his heels into the asphalt. It wasn't enough. The villain was too strong. He began to pull back. "You're dead, kid!" The villain raised a massive sludge hammer to crush Izuku. Izuku flinched. He braced for impact, but the impact never came. A hand grabbed the wire. A large, skeletal hand that suddenly ballooned with muscle. "I really am pathetic," a voice boomed, deep and resonant. Izuku looked back. All Might was there. He was steaming, blood trickling from his mouth, but he was smiling. A furious, terrifying smile. "I told you to be realistic, and here you are, teaching me what it means to be a hero." All Might grabbed Katsuki's arm with his free hand. Detroit. All Might pulled back his fist. The air pressure dropped. The fire seemed to bow in reverence. Smash! The punch was directed upward, creating a localized tornado. The sludge was blasted into the stratosphere. The fire was snuffed out by the sudden vacuum. Rain clouds formed instantly from the atmospheric shift. Within seconds, a gentle rain began to fall on the scorched street. All Might stood tall, his fist raised. The crowd went silent, then erupted into cheers. Izuku sat on the wet pavement, his expensive blazer ruined, his hair a mess. Katsuki sat a few feet away, coughing. "You!" Katsuki wheezed. "Why?" Izuku looked at him. He adjusted his glasses, which were cracked. "Because you looked like you needed help," Izuku said softly. "And your form was terrible. The lecture was inevitable. You idiot! You could have died." Death Arms was shouting, poking Izuku in the chest. "That was reckless! You have no license! You interfered with a crisis." Kamui Woods nodded. "Leave it to the pros, kid." Izuku took the scolding for about 2 minutes. Then, he straightened his back. He brushed Death Arms' finger away. "Interfered?" Izuku asked, his voice cutting through the noise. "Or acted?" The heroes blinked. "I analyzed the situation for 45 seconds before entering," Izuku said, channeling Seiji's most condescending tone. "I identified the gas leak and avoided using sparks. I used a flashbang to disorient, not damage. I used a heat-resistant alloy to attempt extraction." He pointed at Death Arms. "You were standing there because you rely on brute strength and were afraid of the fire." He pointed at Kamui Woods. You were afraid of combustion. He pointed at empty lady. You were worried about property damage liability in a narrow alley. While you were calculating your insurance premiums, Izuku said, picking up his ruined satchel, a middle school student was suffocating. If that is what leaving it to the pros looks like, then the standard for pro has fallen drastically. He bowed stiffly. Now, if you'll excuse me, my brother is going to kill me for renting this suit. He walked away. The heroes stood there, stunned. Behind a police barricade, All Might watched the boy walk away. His smile was gone, replaced by a look of profound realization. He didn't just step in. He dissected them. He has the spirit, and he has the mind. The walk home was quiet. Until Katsuki ran up behind him. Deku! Izuku stopped. I'm not in the mood, Katsuki. I didn't ask for your help. Katsuki yelled, panting. I was fine. You didn't save me. I don't owe you anything. I know, Izuku said. You're welcome anyway. Katsuki stared at him, vibrating with confused rage, then turned and stomped off. Izuku sighed. He turned the corner toward the Hakamata Tower. I am here. All Might slid out from behind a vending machine in a blur of motion. All Might? Izuku jumped back. Why were you behind a vending machine? Stealth. All Might declared. Then poof. He deflated into his skeletal form, coughing up blood. I had to lose the reporters. You should really see a doctor about that cough, Izuku noted. Young man, All Might said, his face turning serious. I have a correction to make. Earlier, I told you that you couldn't be a hero without a quirk. I remember, Izuku said, looking down. I was wrong. Izuku looked up. Back there, the pros stood and watched. I stood and watched. I was held back by my limit, and by fear of exposure. But you, a quirkless, timid boy, you moved. All Might placed a hand on his chest. Top heroes have stories about their school days. Most of them share one thing. Their bodies moved before they could think. Tears began to gather in Izuku's eyes. He clenched his jaw, trying to hold them back. You looked that villain in the eye. You planned. You acted. And you saved that boy when no one else would. All Might pointed a finger at Izuku. You can be a hero. The dam broke. Izuku fell to his knees, sobbing. It wasn't the hysterical crying of his childhood. It was a silent, shaking release of 10 years of tension. Thank you, he choked out. But... All Might raised a finger. I have a proposal. I have a secret, young Midoriya. My quirk was not something I was born with. Izuku froze. His tears stopped. He looked up, his analytical brain rebooting instantly. What? That's biologically impossible. The quirk factor is genetic. Unless you're talking about AFO theory, but that's a myth. It is a sacred torch. All Might interrupted the muttering. Passed down from holder to holder. The power to stockpile power. One for all. One for all. I am looking for a successor, All Might said. Someone to inherit this power. And I believe it should be you. Izuku stared at him. The number one hero was offering him the ultimate quirk. The power to be the symbol. The power to punch through the sky. Most kids would have said yes instantly. Izuku stood up. He wiped his face. I can't answer that right now. All Might face faulted. Eh? Did you hear me? I said ultimate power. I heard you, Izuku said. But I have a family. I have a father and a brother who have spent 7 years training me to fight without power. They built my body. They built my gear. If I accept a quirk that changes my physiology, it changes everything. Izuku looked All Might in the eye. I can't make a decision that affects my body without consulting my designers. We are a team. All Might stared. Then he laughed. A soft, genuine laugh. A team. I like that. Very well. Take me to them. The Hakamata penthouse. 8 p.m. The living room was silent. Seiji sat in his leather armchair, legs crossed, a glass of sparkling water in his hand. Tsunagu, best jeanist, stood by the window, looking out at the city lights, still wearing his hero costume but with the collar loosened. Sitting on the sleek, white sofa was All Might, small Might form, looking incredibly out of place among the high-fashion decor. Izuku sat on a stool, hands on his knees, looking between them. So, Seiji broke the silence. His voice was sharper than a fresh needle. Let me clarify. You want to give my little brother, who I have painstakingly engineered to be the ultimate tactical support hero, a quirk that essentially explodes the user's limbs if they aren't strong enough? All Might flinched. Well, when you put it that way, it is a crude power, Tsunaga mused, turning around. Brute force. A hammer. We have raised Izuku to be a scalpel. The world needs hammers sometimes, jeanist, All Might argued gently. You saw the sludge villain. Izuku was brave, and he was skilled. But he couldn't finish the job. He lacked the raw output to disperse the enemy. With One for All, he would have the power to match his heart. And what of the cost? Seiji asked. You said it breaks bones. Only if the vessel isn't prepared, All Might said. He looked at Izuku. But looking at him, you have prepared him well. He has muscle. He has discipline. He might be able to handle a percentage of it immediately. Izuku looked at Seiji. Seiji and I. Today. I felt it. The limit. Seiji looked at him. I used the tungsten wire. I used the flashbang. I executed the plan perfectly, Izuku said, his voice quiet but firm. But I couldn't pull him out. I wasn't strong enough. Physics 1. If All Might hadn't arrived, Katsuki would be dead. And I would be dead. Izuku stood up. You told me that a quirk is just a tool. That if I don't have one, I should build one. He gestured to All Might. This is a tool. A really, really strong tool. If I add this to what you've taught me, I won't just be a scalpel. I won't just be a hammer. Izuku looked at his hands. I can be the needle that stitches the world together. Strong enough to pierce, but precise enough to mend. Tsunaga smiled. It was a proud smile, spoken like a true Hakamata. Tsunaga looked at All Might. We accept. On one condition. All Might sat up straight. Name it. He does not fight like you, Tsunaga said. He does not become a brawler. He does not break himself to throw a punch. Seiji stood up and walked over to Izuku. He poked Izuku's bicep. I will redesign his suit, Seiji muttered, his mind already racing. We need compression bracing to support the bone structure. Impact diffusion weaving. If he's going to emit force, we need vent ports. Seiji looked at All Might. If you give him this power, Yagi-san, you are providing the engine. But I am building the chassis. And I am steering the driver. He is your successor, but he is my brother. Do we have an understanding? All Might stood up and bowed deeply. I would have it no other way. All Might plucked a golden hair from his head. Izuku Midoriya, All Might said, holding out the hair. This is the first step. Eat this, Seiji gagged. Disgusting. Is there no sanitary way to transfer genetic material? A syringe? A pill? It has to be ingested. All Might defended. Put it in a tea, Tsunaga suggested, walking to the kitchen. Earl Grey. It masks the taste of DNA. Izuku looked at the hair. He looked at his family, his stern, brilliant brother, and his stoic, heroic father figure. And the symbol of peace, looking hopeful. He smiled. I'll take the tea. That night, Izuku lay in bed. His body felt warm, a low thrumming energy buzzing beneath his skin. One for all. He looked at the ceiling. I have the power, he thought. Now comes the hard part. He turned his head to look at the mannequin in the corner, where his ruined suit hung. I have to make it fit. Izuku closed his eyes. He didn't dream of smashing robots or punching villains. He dreamed of threads. Glowing, golden threads, weaving through his muscles, reinforcing his bones, waiting to be pulled tight. He was a Hakamata. And he was going to weave a new kind of heroism. The smell of Dagoba Municipal Beach Park was no longer the acrid stench of rotting garbage and saltwater rust. It was the smell of sea spray, wet sand, and the faint, metallic scent of ozone. It was 5:30 a.m. on the day of the UA entrance exam. Izuku Midoriya stood atop a small dune of pristine sand, his chest heaving rhythmically. He wasn't gasping. Hakamatas did not gasp. They regulated their intake. Over the last 10 months, the beach had been transformed. It wasn't just clean, it was manicured. Time, a sharp voice cut through the morning air. Seiji Hakamata sat on a folding camping chair, an expensive one with lumbar support, and a side table for his espresso, watching a stopwatch. 14 minutes and 12 seconds to clear the final sector, Seiji critiqued, sipping his coffee. You were lagging on the refrigerator haul. Your leverage was off by 3 degrees. The sand shifted, Izuku replied, wiping sweat from his forehead with a monogram towel. I had to adjust the fulcrum of the pulley system. Excuses are loose threads, Izuku. Snip them. Standing next to Seiji, looking like a fish out of water in a baggy yellow suit, was All Might. The symbol of peace was in his skeletal form, staring at the beach with wide, sunken eyes. He cleared it all, All Might whispered. And he didn't even drag half of it. He used physics. All Might pointed to the pile of scrap metal near the road. It was neatly stacked, sorted by alloy type. Izuku hadn't just moved the trash. He had organized it using a complex system of winches, carbon fiber cables, and sheer geometric genius. Brute force is inefficient, Jagi-san, Seiji said, standing up and smoothing his trousers. Why lift a washing machine with your back when you can lift it with a localized block and tackle rig and a 5% output of kinetic energy? Seiji turned to Izuku. Come here. Izuku jogged over. He was shirtless, revealing a torso that was no longer scrawny. He was lean, corded with wiry, dense muscle. Scars from wire burns crisscrossed his forearms and palms. The price of mastering the fiber arts. You are ready physically, Seiji said, inspecting Izuku's deltoids like he was checking the grain of a fine leather. Your vessel is prepared. Now for the engine. All Might stepped forward. The mood shifted. The morning sun cast long shadows, making the skeletal hero look almost ethereal. Young Midoriya, All Might said, his voice deepening into his hero register even without the muscle form. You have proven yourself. You have the heart. You have the mind. And now, thanks to your brother's intense regimen, you have the body. All Might plucked a single, golden hair from his head. This is it. The torch passed down through generations. Eat this. Izuku stared at the hair. He looked at Seiji. Seiji sighed and pulled a small, silver flask from his jacket pocket. Here. Earl Grey, double steeped, with a hint of bergamot and honey. It should mask the texture. Izuku took the hair, placed it on his tongue, and washed it down with the tea. He swallowed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a warmth bloomed in his stomach. It wasn't the explosive rush he expected. It felt like putting on a jacket that had been sitting on a radiator. It was a comforting, humming heat that spread through his veins, stitching itself into his very DNA. How does it feel? All Might asked anxiously. Izuku looked at his hands. He clenched his fist. He didn't activate the power. He knew better than to test a nuclear reactor without reading the manual first. But he could feel it. A stockpile of energy, waiting like a coiled spring. It feels. Izuku whispered, woven. Good, Seiji checked his watch. Now shower. We have a schedule. The exam starts in 2 hours, and if you are late I will disown you. The Hakamata penthouse, 7 a.m. The dressing room was quiet. Izuku stood before the full-length mirror. He wasn't wearing a school uniform. For the practical exam, Yui allowed appropriate activewear. For most students, that meant gym shorts and a t-shirt. For a Hakamata, it meant a statement piece. Hold still, Seiji muttered, kneeling to adjust the hem of Izuku's pants. The outfit was a masterpiece of functional design. It was a 2-piece tracksuit, but to call it a tracksuit was an insult. It was a tactical garment constructed from a breathable, tear-resistant ballistic weave in a deep, midnight green. The jacket was fitted, tapering at the waist to reduce wind resistance, with a high collar that framed the jawline, a signature of the best jeanist brand. The pants were slightly looser around the thighs to allow for high kicks and deep lunges, tapering to a tight fit at the ankles where they tucked into reinforced combat boots. Running down the sides of the sleeves and legs were thin lines of reflective silver piping. They weren't just decorative, they were conductive strips that helped dissipate the static electricity generated by the high-speed wire spools. The belt, Seiji commanded. Izuku clicked the red utility belt around his waist. It was the only splash of bright color, a deliberate homage to All Might's boots. On the belt hung 4 spools of carbon nanotube wire and a pouch for medical supplies. Finally, Izuku pulled on his gloves. The Mark V binding gauntlets. They were sleek, black, and integrated seamlessly into the sleeves of the jacket. Seiji stood up and stepped back. He adjusted his glasses, his critical gaze sweeping over Izuku. Shoulders back, Seiji said. Izuku straightened. Chin up. Izuku lifted his chin. Seiji stared for a long moment. Then, he nodded. You look expensive, Seiji said. Don't get it dirty. I'll try not to, Izuku smiled nervously. But, it's an exam. There are robots. Robots dispense oil and grease. Avoid it. Seiji walked to the table and picked up a small earpiece. Tsunaga wanted to be here, but there was a hostage situation in Kyushu. He sent this message. Seiji played the audio file. Best jeanist's calm, smooth voice filled the room. Izuku. The fabric of society is held together by those who can bear the tension. Today, you do not just take an exam. You present your debut collection to the world. Do not fray. Keep your threads tight. And remember, style is not just what you wear. It is how you win. Izuku took a deep breath. The warmth of one for all hummed in his chest, vibrating against the sternum. I'm ready. Yui High School gates, 8:30 a.m. The sheer scale of UA was intimidating. The glass walls of the main building reflected the blue sky, creating a monument to heroism that made every student walking through the gates feel small. Izuku walked with a steady, measured pace. He could feel the eyes on him. It wasn't just his focused demeanor, it was the outfit. While other examinees wore baggy gym clothes, Izuku looked like he had just walked off a movie set for a sci-fi thriller. Out of my way, Deku. The growl came from behind. Izuku didn't flinch. He recognized the heavy, stomping gait. Good morning, Katsuki, Izuku said, sidestepping smoothly to the left without breaking his stride. The flow of traffic is optimal in the center lane. Please proceed. Bakugo Katsuki stomped past, his shoulders hunched. He looked like a walking explosion. He glared at Izuku, his eyes lingering on the high-tech gauntlets. Fancy toys, Bakugo scoffed. Hope they come with an eject button for when you wet yourself. They have a quick-release mechanism for emergency entanglement, Izuku corrected automatically. Standard safety protocol. Bakugo twitched, confused by the literal answer, and stormed off muttering about nerds. Izuku exhaled. One crisis averted. He took another step and immediately tripped. Not over his own feet. His proprioception was perfect thanks to Seiji's drills. He tripped over an uneven paving stone that had been dislodged by the crowd. Gravity took hold. Impact in 0.8 seconds. Hands are occupied with exam ticket. Tuck and roll? No, too crowded. Engage core. Before he could correct his balance, he felt himself floating. Whoa there, a bubbly voice. Izuku looked down. His feet were hovering 3 inches off the ground. A girl with a round face and brown bob-cut hair was smiling at him, her hand touching his shoulder. Are you okay? She asked. It's bad luck to fall before the exam. I'm Uraraka Ochako. She released him, and gravity returned. Izuku landed softly, his knees bending to absorb the slight drop. Thank you, Izuku said, adjusting his collar. My center of gravity shifted unexpectedly. Your quirk, gravity manipulation? Yep. She beamed. And wow, I love your outfit. Is that custom? It looks super pro. It's a prototype, Izuku said, feeling his cheeks heat up. My brother made it. Cool. Well, good luck. Let's do our best. She waved and ran off. Izuku stood there, blinking. He had spoken to a girl. He hadn't stuttered much. He hadn't died. Progress, he thought. Now, just the written exam. The written exam. The written portion was underwhelming. Seiji Hakamada did not believe in grade-level education. Since age 7, Izuku had been tutored in structural engineering, textile physics, advanced mathematics, and quirk law. Question 4. Calculate the tensile stress on a bridge support beam if a gigantification quirk user of 40 tons stands on the midpoint. Izuku smirked. Seiji made me calculate this for a suspension bridge made of denim last week. This is basic. He finished the exam 20 minutes early and spent the remaining time analyzing the structural integrity of the ceiling tiles. The practical exam orientation. Everybody say hey. Present mixed voice boomed through the auditorium. Izuku sat in the middle row, his notebook open. While other students were getting hyped or confused, Izuku was sketching 3 robot types. 1 pointer, fast, lightly armored. 2 pointer, medium armor, likely treads. 3 pointer, heavy, missiles or cannons. Excuse me. May I ask a question? A tall boy with glasses and engines in his cab stood up, pointing aggressively at the screen. The handout clearly mentions 4 types of villains. If this is a printing error, you should be ashamed. And you, the boy spun around, pointing a stiff finger directly at Izuku. Me? Izuku pointed at himself. Yes, you. The one in the designer tracksuit. You've been muttering about wire tension and alloy composition for the last 5 minutes. It's distracting. If you're here to critique fashion, you should leave. The auditorium chuckled. Izuku felt the heat rise in his neck, but he remembered Seiji's training. Posture. Dignity. Izuku stood up. He adjusted his glasses. I apologize for the disturbance, Izuku said, his voice projecting clearly. However, I was not critiquing fashion. I was calculating the likely composition of the 4th robot based on the budget allocation of the other 3. To answer your question before Present Mike does, the 4th robot is a gimmick. 0 points. An obstacle to be avoided, not fought. A chaos factor. The auditorium went silent. Present Mike stared. Yeah. That listener is correct. It's the 0 pointer. Avoid it like a bad trend. The engine boy, Ida Tenya, blinked, his mouth slightly open. Chaos factor? I see. Thank you for the insight. He bowed rigidly and sat down. Izuku sat down, exhaling slowly. Seiji would be proud. I dominated the conversation. Battle Center B. The gates to the mock city were massive. A crowd of examinees stood waiting, stretching, nervous energy crackling in the air. Izuku stood at the front, near the gate. He checked his gauntlets. Green light. Battery full. Wire spools locked. He closed his eyes and reached inside himself. He found the ball of fire that was one for all. Don't unleash it, he told himself. Just awaken it. He imagined the power flowing through him not as a flood, but as a lining in his suit. A thin, reinforcing layer of energy. Full cowling, 5%. Green lightning crackled faintly around his body, barely visible in the sunlight. His senses sharpened. The world slowed down. Start! Present Mix's voice screamed from the tower. Most students hesitated. Izuku did not. Boom! He launched himself forward. The ground beneath his boots cracked slightly. He wasn't running. He was gliding. There are no countdowns in real battles. Mike shouted. Run! Follow that green blur. Izuku was already inside the city. A 1-pointer, a wheeled drone, rounded the corner, its sensors locking onto him. Target acquired. Too slow, Izuku whispered. He raised his left hand. Click! A wire shot out, wrapping around the robot's front axle. Izuku kept running, passing the robot. As the wire went taut, he didn't pull. He anchored it to a lamppost with his right hand as he flew past. The robot's momentum worked against it. The wire snapped tight, yanking the axle. The robot flipped into the air, crashing upside down. Its sensors shattered. 1 point. Izuku didn't stop. He vaulted up a fire escape, using a burst of OFA to jump 20 feet in a single bound. From the rooftops, he saw the battlefield. 2 2-pointers on North Street. 1 3-pointer on the East Plaza. He ran across the roof. A 2-pointer, a tank-like tread robot, was aiming at a student. Izuku leapt off the roof. Gravity OFA 5% steel-toed boot. He dropped like a meteor. He didn't punch the robot. He landed on top of it, driving his heels into the joint between the turret and the chassis. Crunch. The metal buckled. The internal wiring severed. The robot powered down instantly. 3 points. Izuku backflipped off the smoking husk. Who is that guy? A student yelled. He's not even using a quirk. He's just dismantling them. He is using a quirk. Another shouted. Look at the lightning. Izuku moved like a spider. He used his wires to swing around corners, to trip robots, to bind their turrets together so they shot each other. Whenever a robot was too thick for wires, he used OFA. but never a smash. A precise, 5% enhanced palm strike to the battery pack. A kick to the visual sensor. He was a surgeon in a war zone. 28 points, 35 points, 42 points. He was breathing hard now. Maintaining 5% full cowling was exhausting. It felt like holding a flexed muscle for 10 minutes straight. Time check, 2 minutes remaining. He landed in the central plaza. It was chaos. Debris everywhere. 45 points, Izuku muttered. That should be enough to pass, provided the cutoff isn't unusually high this year. Then, the ground jumped. Boom, boom. It wasn't an explosion. It was footsteps. From the main avenue, a shadow eclipsed the sun. The zero-pointer. It was colossal. Taller than the skyscrapers. Its green metal face looked down with cold indifference. It punched a building, sending tons of concrete raining down. The examinees screamed, "Run! It's the zero-pointer! That thing is huge!" The crowd turned and fled. It was the logical choice. It was the survival choice. Izuku turned to run too. Seiji had been clear. Do not engage the zero-pointer. It is a waste of resources and tailored suits. He took a step back. Ow! A cry of pain. Faint buried under the rumble of the robot. Izuku stopped. His head snapped toward the sound. In the middle of the street, trapped under a pile of rubble, was the girl with the gravity quirk. Uraraka. She was struggling, her leg pinned. The zero-pointer was looming over her. Its massive tread was grinding forward. It would crush her in 10 seconds. The other students were running away. Seiji said retreat. Logic says retreat. But logic didn't save Mom. Izuku's body moved before his brain gave permission. He spun around. The green lightning around him flared, brighter, angrier. Alpha, 8%. He sprinted toward the robot. Hey! Idiot! What are you doing? A student screamed. Izuku didn't hear them. He was doing math. Target mass, approximate, 100 tons. My mass, 65 kilograms. Direct impact, ineffective. Wires, tensile strength exceeded if used directly. I can't stop it. I have to trip it. He reached the rubble. He grabbed the concrete slab pinning Uraraka. Hold on. With a grunt, engaging his back muscles and OFA, he heaved the slab off her. Can you move? He yelled. My ankle, she winced. Okay. Stay low. Izuku turned to the robot. It was terrifyingly close. The tread was a wall of churning metal. I need a tripwire. But I need 2 anchors. He looked left and right. 2 sturdy buildings on either side of the street. Izuku raised both gauntlets. Max tension, he commanded the voice-activated system. Disengage safety limiters. Warning, motor burnout imminent. The HUD in his glasses flashed red. Do it! He fired. Thwip thwip. The anchors bit deep into the concrete pillars of the buildings on both sides. The wires stretched across the street, right in front of the robot's shin level. But the wires were too thin. They would snap against the robot's force. I need to add tension. I need to be the fulcrum. Izuku grabbed both wires in the center, pulling them together, creating a V shape. He stood directly in the robot's path. He channeled one for all. Not 5%. Not 8%. He visualized the knot. The point where all the stress meets. One for all, 15%. Pain shot through his arms. His muscles screamed as the power flooded him. Hey, ugly! Izuku screamed at the machine. The robot looked down. Izuku crouched. Smash! Jump! He didn't punch. He jumped straight up. He held the wires tight. As he rocketed into the air, he pulled the wires upward with him, lifting the tripwire from shin height to ankle height. Just as the robot lifted its foot for a step, the robot's foot caught the wire. The tension was immense. The buildings groaned. The wires sang a high-pitched note of impending failure. Izuku felt his shoulders popping. The recoil of the winches was tearing at his arms. Snap! The middle finger of his right hand broke under the strain of holding the wire grip. But the physics held. The robot's forward momentum was checked at the ankle. It stumbled. The massive machine tipped forward. Gravity, the great equalizer, took over. Uraraka! Gravity! Now! Izuku screamed from the air. Uraraka understood. She slapped a piece of debris, making it float, and threw it at the robot's head to distract it. No, she slapped herself and floated out of the crush zone. The zero-pointer crashed face first into the street with an earth-shattering boom. The shockwave blew out windows for 3 blocks. Izuku hung in the air for a moment, suspended by his wires, staring down at the fallen giant. Then, his anchors gave way. The concrete of the buildings crumbled. Izuku fell. He had no wire left. His finger was broken. His arms were numb, falling. Terminal velocity. Slap. A soft hand touched his back. Release. Izuku stopped falling inches from the ground. He flopped onto the asphalt, groaning. That? Izuku wheezed, staring at his throbbing, purple finger. That wasn't part of the plan. The aftermath. Good grief, Recovery Girl sighed, handing Izuku a gummy bear. You have a compound fracture in your right middle finger and micro tears in both triceps. And your fancy suit is ruined. Izuku looked down. The sleeves of his Seiji original tracksuit were shredded. The winch mechanisms were smoking ruins. My brother is going to kill me, Izuku whimpered. He saved me. Uraraka chirped from the next bed, where her ankle was being iced. Did you see him? He tripped a giant robot. With string. Ida Tenya was standing in the doorway, watching. He adjusted his glasses. He assessed the threat. He realized brute force wouldn't work. He engineered a solution in seconds, risking his own body to execute it. That is a hero. 1 week later, the Hakamata penthouse was tense. Seiji was pacing. He had been pacing for 2 hours. The post is late, Seiji muttered. The Japanese postal service is usually impeccable. This is a sign of societal collapse. Izuku sat on the sofa, clutching a pillow. His finger was healed, mostly, thanks to Recovery Girl, but it still stiffened when it rained. Maybe I didn't get in, Izuku said softly. I destroyed the suit. That's minus points for style. The suit served its purpose, Tsunaga said from the kitchen, where he was brewing tea. It protected the wearer. The doorbell rang. Seiji teleported to the door, not a quirk, just sheer anxiety speed. He snatched the letter from the mailbox and marched back. Yue High School, Seiji read. He handed it to Izuku. Open it. Carefully. Use a letter opener. Izuku's hands shook as he sliced the envelope. A metal disc fell out. FZZZT. A hologram projected into the room. I am here. All Might appeared, wearing a bright yellow suit. As a projection, All Might. Izuku gasped. Young Midoriya. Or should I say, young Hakamata Midoriya. The results are in. All Might cleared his throat. Written exam, 98%. Perfect scores in tactics and law. Excellent. Your brother's tutoring is terrifyingly effective, Seiji smirked. Naturally. Practical exam. Villain points, 45. A respectable score. You dismantled those robots with the precision of a seasoned pro. Izuku let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. 45 was good. It was passing. But, All Might leaned into the camera. A hero's job is not just to destroy enemies. It is to save people. And you, young man, performed the most spectacular save of the day. The video cut to footage of the zero-pointer falling. It showed Izuku holding the wires, his face contorted in effort, screaming for Uraraka to move. You risked everything to save a competitor. You used your head, your heart, and your breaking point. Rescue points, 60. Izuku's eyes went wide. Total score, 105 points. First place. All Might extended a hand toward the camera. Izuku. You are a tailor of fate. Come to Yue. This is your hero academia. The hologram faded. Silence filled the room. Izuku stared at the disc. Tears pricked his eyes. He tried to hold them back, salt stains, and all that, but he couldn't. I did it. Tsunaga walked over and placed a hand on Izuku's head. You did, Seiji sniffed, turning away to hide his own smile. He picked up his tablet. Well, Seiji said, his voice thick with emotion he refused to acknowledge. We have work to do. If you're going to be the top student, we need to upgrade the gauntlets. The Mark V motors burned out too easily. I'm thinking hydraulic assist for the Mark VI. Izuku wiped his eyes and smiled, a blinding, genuine smile. Yes, Seiji and I. Let's make them perfect. Yui Teacher's Lounge. Aizawa Shoto sat in his sleeping bag, watching the replay of exam site B. He paused the video on the frame where Izuku was mid-air, wires extended, binding the zero-pointer. Capture weapons, Aizawa muttered. High tensile wire. Joint manipulation. Minimal property damage to the surroundings, maximum impact on the target. He grinned, a terrifying expression. He fights like a spider. Best Jeanist raised a rational one. Aizawa closed the laptop. This year might actually be interesting.